Welcome. I'd like to call to order the March 10th, 2026 meeting of the Policy and Services Committee of the Palo Alto City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Rectal?
Here.
Councilmember Stone?
Here.
Councilmember Lithcott-Hames?
Here.
For the record, all present.
Great. Now we'll turn to public comment on items that are not on our agenda. Madam Clerk, how many people do we have?
We currently have one request to speak on items not on the agenda.
Okay, great.
Our first speaker is David P.
Hello, council members. Thank you for being here tonight. I don't know if people say this often enough, but I appreciate the work that you do and all the stuff that happens behind closed doors and off the camera and so on and so forth. And so I wanted to give you a heads up. I'm going to go into a rant, but I apologize. And anyway, thank you for doing what you do. I wanted to talk about the flock issue. ICE has been supposedly using data from traffic cameras, and I know we have some here in Palo Alto. I think it's a terrible situation we're in, and as you know, ICE has shown themselves to be dishonest. They lie about things, they commit crimes, they lie about the crimes they commit, and I don't think my town here should be helping them in any way, especially by giving them the data from the cameras that we have at various intersections across town. So whatever you can do to stop this data sharing, I hope you would do it as much as you can, as soon as you can. And I know I've talked with some other people about this. They're not here tonight, but I wanted to say that they are hoping that you'll do that as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I will note that item 4 is somewhat related to that comment, so you might want to stick around and hear what happens there. Thank you.
That concludes public comment on items not on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Let's turn to item 1, nonprofit partnership work plan. Follow-up recommendation on Winter Lodge tennis lease extension and the status of phase 1 grant funding process. Ms. Alamos?
Yes. Good evening, Chair and committee members. Lupita Alamos, Assistant to the City Manager. Next slide, please. Tonight's items will continue the discussion of the nonprofit work plan, the phase 2, which covers a long-term lease framework and recommendation to council to extend the Winter Lodge tennis lease, and also to receive a status update on the nonprofit work plan, the phase 1 granting process, the refinement, the next steps for that process. So not in itself that work, but the next steps on how to approach that work. Next. So as a quick background, this work stems from an audit report back from 2022 that reviewed and recommended best practices on nonprofit management. To initiate this work, the council discussed a set of nonprofit guidelines, nonprofit guiding principles, which are listed on this slide, that would guide the approach to nonprofit partnerships and then directed the Policy and Services Committee to refine those guidelines. Next slide. Staff has identified 4 major bodies of work that make up the nonprofit partnership work plan, to which the guiding principles would be applied. Tonight, we continue the work on the nonprofit leases, and specifically those long-term leases, which are typically categorized as over 10 years or more. They usually preserve a historic resource or service that is valued by the Palo Alto community. Next slide. So the framework that was discussed at the previous Policy and Services Committee in November of last year looked at 3 major areas that made up this long-term lease framework. one of which is looking at what is the public benefit of this partnership, looking at the financial relationship, which would be balanced by not only the financial piece, but the qualitative measures of the partnership. And then also, how do we ensure the stability of this partnership, such as would be with a long-term lease? And to these three sections, we reflected the applying the guiding principles as well as some of the audit recommendations. And those are described in further detail in the report. So overall, the policy and services felt that this was a good framework, but wanted a little bit more information as it related to Winter Lodge and Lawn Bowls leases as it related to public benefit. So tonight we will be going through a little bit more information on public access and pricing for tennis lease. And as a little bit of background on the property and the lease, which was also linked in the report, the Community Skating Inc., which is known as Winter Lodge, operates under two leases. One is the ice rink, which expires in 2040, as well as tennis courts, which expires or will be expiring this month, I believe, in 2026. And as a history of the tennis, this became an option to lease back in 1995, the original lease for the tennis facility after being converted from, I believe, a swim school in that space. The original intent at that time, and worthy of noting, was that the tennis lease would be coextensive and coterminous with the Winter Lodge rink lease as well. In 2001, the Winter Lodge was selected through a competitive process to continue operating. So they have a long history of fully maintaining and operating both the rink and the tennis courts on that site. Also important to note that as the tennis lease requires them to fully maintain and operate the school, they will be engaging in over 90,000 court resurfacing that is planned for the next couple of months prior to its summer season. Next slide. So for the policy and services request for more information on pricing and public access, this table summarizes for the court access and the cost of lessons, both private and group lessons for Winter Lodge, and as a comparison, we also included what the city charges and makes available for public use. Should be noted that Winter Lodge lease terms do allow for pricing of goods and or services to be comparable, one, to market pricing, and also that it be allowed for accumulation of funds for continued maintenance and capital improvements. So we see here that in the first row, the open court use, Winter Lodge courts are open for reservation by the public on a first-come, first-served basis online at $40 an hour, whereas the city provides its courts when not in use by a lesson or a USTA tournament, also on a first-come, first-served, but no reservations allowed and no cost to the public. Youth, adult, and private lessons are listed in this table for Winter Lodge at $37 to $70 an hour, depending on the level of expertise by the instructor, whereas the city ranges from $20 to $42 an hour. And then for private lessons, Winter Lodge charges $100 to $200, whereas the city charges $100 to $125. So there is a 24 to 40% higher rate for Winter Lodge lessons, but again, taking into consideration that they are trying to accumulate funds for their expensive resurfacing and maintenance of the facilities. Next slide. So that concludes the Phase 2. Within this item, we also have the nonprofit work plan Phase 1 status report. At its January 14th meeting, the Policy and Services discussed various elements to improve the Phase 1 process, which provided a structured approach to evaluate nonprofit funding requests that generally fall outside of established process. And the committee discussed those improvements and recommended that further refinement was needed on a more structural piece of the program, which was the purpose, wanting to define the purpose of the Phase 1, and also defining Phase 1's relationship to HSRAP, the Human Services Resource Allocation process. And also to provide feedback on recommendations on those Phase 1 improvements. So staff is recommending a broader discussion with the council, would be a good fit for discussing purpose and alignment with HSRAP. And this is tentatively scheduled for April 6th. And staff is working on the materials, but a draft table has been attached to this report to give the council kind of a broader, big picture look at all of our nonprofit contracts, including grants and service agreements. And next slide. Also included in your packet is a draft timeline that explores options to maintain and keep the Phase 1 within the original plan to have these adopted in with the budget adoption process in June. So this will be further discussed at the study session, but it included here as a status update. Okay. Next slide. So that concludes my report, and turn it back to the chair.
Thank you, Ms. Almos. Colleagues, anybody got a technical question you'd like to ask before we turn it over to public comment? Okay, let's move to public comment on this item.
We currently have 2 requests to speak for item number 1. Our first speaker is Linda J., followed by David S.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Linda Stebbins Jensen, Executive Director of Winter Lodge, and we are pleased to be here tonight to be available to answer questions and to be in support of the staff report and recommending your approval of Winter Lodge's tennis lease renewal to City Council. We've had a long and wonderfully successful public-private partnership with the City of Palo Alto for almost 40 years, and we've been offering recreational programs in Palo Alto for 70 years. Our recreational tennis programs are for all ages and abilities, with a special focus on youth, whom we see as an at-risk, underserved population in Palo Alto. Our kids are in desperate need of additional healthy, physical, non-competitive recreation options away from screens. Winter Lodge ice skating and tennis sites offer this and serve as that third place for so many of our youth. Winter Lodge programs are 100% operationally funded at no cost to the City of Palo Alto, and we are pleased with our record of providing award-winning facilities and programs. We respectfully ask that you affirm the staff report and recommend renewal of the tennis site lease to City Council so that we may continue this tradition of excellence in serving the people of Palo Alto. Thank you.
Our next speaker is David S.
Hi, my name is David Siegel. I'm a 35-year Palo Alto resident and president of the Palo Alto Pickleball Club. I'm here because the Parks and Recreation Commission directed the club to find ways to mitigate any tennis impact from potentially repurposing 2 tennis courts at Mitchell Park for pickleball. Reviewing all tennis facilities and agreements led me to the Kim Grant lease that you're considering tonight, and 2 significant concerns that I'll ask you to consider before any renewal. The first one is rent. The lease calls for just $100 to be paid over a 10-year period of time. By comparison, Tom Sarsfield pays the city $14,000 annually for private lesson use of forecourts, plus a six-figure revenue share on city-sponsored classes. I also reviewed the Winter Lodge tax returns and could not confirm one way or the other whether Kim Grant pays anything additionally. Either way, the current arrangement provides no meaningful fiscal impact to the city. Second, and really more important, public access. When Sarsfield isn't using the assigned courts, they're open to the public at no charge. Consistent with how the city handles baseball fields, soccer fields, and other athletic facilities, the Kim Grant lease clearly intended some degree of public access. Section 2 of the lease describes the purpose, and I quote, "A recreational facility offering tennis for public play and instruction." Section 3 requires, quote, "a public recreational tennis facility, including tennis instruction and/or scheduled public use." Yet currently, there is no free public access. The public can book courts at $40 per hour, more than double the city's $16 per hour permit rate. I'm also concerned about the proposals to make this lease coterminous with the Winter Lodge lease for 14 more years. That's an unnecessarily long commitment, given how circumstances might evolve over time. I am not suggesting for a minute that the city shouldn't lease this property to Kim Grant. The program may be very well excellent and worth supporting, but the terms, specific terms, warrant serious review. At minimum, restore the original intent. Open these courts to the public at no charge when not in use for instruction, consistent with Sarsfield and other city sports facilities. Better still, consider restructuring the lease with market rate rent or a revenue sharing arrangement while maintaining free public access when the courts are otherwise idle, which during school hours is often. A revised lease could mean meaningful financial benefit to the city, aligned with standard practice for city-owned athletic facilities, expand public access, and help offset any potential reduction in tennis court availability if and when pickleball expands. If you don't have adequate time to evaluate this fully, I would suggest you extend the current lease by a few months rather than rush into a long-term renewal. Thank you for your time.
That concludes public comment on item number 1.
Thank you, and we'll return to the dais. Who'd like to start us off?
So are we going to talk? Do you want to divide this up in two pieces, or do you want to? Okay.
Let's talk about Winter Lodge, the tennis lease, and then come to some conclusion on that, and then we'll move on to the Phase 1 nonprofit work plan stuff. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll start with Winter Lodge. Yeah, Winter Lodge really is an incredible community asset. I mean, my kids learned to skate there. We had parties galore, both for schools and birthdays. It really is a community asset. And there's other places where kids would meet, like bowling alleys have gone away. So it really is important that we keep assets like this going. And the fact that it's run, the tennis court and the skate park is run together as a single entity is very important. The price differences are kind of apples and oranges when we compare what the city charges versus Winter Lodge, just because Winter Lodge has to do all this maintenance. The city does not wrap that in. The taxpayers separately pay for that. So it's good data, good metrics, but I don't think it's an apples-to-apples comparison. I am a bit concerned, we talked about should the residents get a discount. I'm a bit concerned about adding that complexity to the website, because now Winter Lodge has to verify, is someone really a resident or not, and that overhead may not be good. Perhaps we can have beginner lessons put into Enjoy catalog. Then the city could look at, is this person low income? Is this person a resident? And change the fees associated with that. And then that would be on us, not on Winter Lodge. That might be a good way of easing and providing some resident benefit without complicating Winter Lodge's website. The other thing is that maintenance is quite expensive, and I have to think that we surface tennis courts all the time, and we have probably a very good deal with some tennis court provider. So can we use that same tennis court provider volume discount effectively and apply that to Winter Lodge? Because right now they're just going out to bid, and they're just having to pay market price, and if we get below market, we can help them out and add add assets or add value to them without costing any money to the city. So I think that would be something we should look at. But overall, I support the Winter Lodge, and I think we should renew the lease.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councilmember Ruckdahl. Winter Lodge clearly fits within the parameters of nonprofits that we want to support in this community. They're offering the third place for many members of our community, providing recreational opportunities for countless children and adults. I kind of doubt there's a Palo Alton who has never skated there or knows somebody who kind of grew up skating, or I'm mostly skating there, and I have a lot of friends, and really actually is the only place I'm embarrassed to say that I've skated in my life. I'm not great, that's probably why. I've got 4 years to the next Olympics. I got time. Sorry? Oh, yeah, I forgot the Midwesterners. Okay, sorry, I'm a California boy. So I mean, it is a true cherished community asset, and there's this difficulty there that the kind of due to the unique nature of their lease agreement, that they need to be fully self-funded. I think allowing them to charge for their facilities makes sense when appropriate, but I do struggle with this idea that the courts are public courts that are not accessible to the public without paying that $40 fee. I live right down the street from Winter Lodge. My wife and I have never once went to play tennis there because of the fee. Not going to pay $40 when I can go to Hoover across the street and pay for and play for free. And so it's just, for me, it's kind of more like a philosophical, it's a community asset. Those are public courts, and yet I don't believe truly accessible to the public when a fee has to be paid. So that continues to be problematic for me, although understanding we want to keep Winter Lodge there, and we want to make sure that this lease, if it continues to be that they have to be fully self-funded, I don't think I've got the information in front of me to really be able to know how much Winter Lodge makes annually on those court reservations, and what that would then do to their ability to be able to pay if we took that. And so I don't know if staff has any feedback on that, or is that just more of a, when we enter into lease negotiations, that is something that can be explored?
We don't have an analysis on the level of maintenance to revenue generated. It is something that we could look at, but I also would invite our real estate manager to kind of speak on the specifics of looking at negotiating a lease with Winter Lodge and those types of terms.
Good evening, Sonny Tong with the city's real estate division. We currently don't have any financial information on the tenant's operations, but yeah, we can add that as a reporting requirement so that we can get that information if needed.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, and I think if we're able to kind of establish at least parameters of kind of what we're looking for, of wanting that to be publicly accessible when possible, and because I also agree with Councilman Ruckdahl as far as I don't think the different rate for Palo Altons and all that seems to get really complicated. So I think it should either be it's free or it's not, and so kind of giving staff the freedom to be able to pursue that in negotiation, but then also the deference to all of you for you to know at what point maybe does that no longer become feasible from Winter Lodge's perspective, because again, community asset, we're in partnership here, but also want to keep public assets open to the public.
Right, yeah, understood. We'll keep that in mind.
Thank you. No.
Okay, thank you. Well, I do have to say, the two of us grew up in the Midwest, and I can't make assumptions about Councilmember Rectal because you were in Minnesota and I was in Wisconsin. But in Wisconsin, it would get cold for like 6 months and any body of water would freeze over. And so we didn't go to places like Winter Lodge. We went to little marshes in our neighborhood that had frozen over and skated on them. And so when I came here to Palo Alto as a grown-up, and we settled here and discovered Winter Lodge, I was just delighted that my own kids were going to get a chance to learn to skate. It was second nature for a Midwesterner to put on a set of ice skates, just like it's second nature, I think, in California to play volleyball or soccer or everything else. And so I, too, have a family story of going to Winter Lodge and really enjoying that. I didn't realize until trying to do my due diligence on this item how long Winter Lodge has been here, 40 years with the city and 70 years total. And what I learned was that their site was threatened by the owner who wanted to build condos there. And so the citizens decided, no, we can't have this happen. And they ended up, there's a mandate from the voters to swap this land. And so Winter Lodge, the Winter Lodge land that we know, became city land really at the insistence of the voters a long time ago. And I understand it's, the city's required to keep the land for recreation, and the programs will be run on the site with no funding from the city. So here we have this challenge of how they, pay their operating expenses and capital expenses as well. Ms. Jensen, since you are here, I wonder if you are prepared to share with us your annual operating expenses and any consideration you have made of an alternate fee structure that would perhaps create more of a sense of benefit for Palo Alto residents?
Thank you. So while I was sitting there listening to all that you had to say and what the gentleman who spoke had to say, I was thinking, well, it is a little apples to oranges here. So I think we all understand that we're under the duty to pay for all of these courts. The people using the city courts are not paying for that right to, or the expectation and the demand to keep those courts in shape. The city, we, the citizens, pay that. But I was also thinking that we do have a few openings during the week. I think if you looked at the schedule, there are a few openings during the week, and like we talked about, they're available for scheduling for the public. So I was thinking, gosh, it might be a realistic option for both of us to sort of compromise and say, hey, maybe when we're not using the tennis courts for our classes and our lessons, and there's an open time, it could be scheduled either at the same rate that you pay to schedule a city court, or even less. Just because I think that it shows that we are open to the public, and in fact, our skating school is 100% open to the public. Anyone can walk in and sign up for classes, so there is no restriction. But as far as when those open times happen, we would absolutely be open to talking about how much that costs per hour or trying to have us partially fund that. So those were my thoughts about that.
Thank you for that, for thinking on your feet on that. Can you share with us what your annual operating expenses are for the tennis?
So I don't have that separated out at this moment, but I certainly can with staff. But as you know, Winter Lodge is a 501c3. We're a nonprofit operation, so our income versus expenses they're not a lot different. But the minor profits that we do have, we hold over year to year for the major expenses like the tennis court resurfacing, which unfortunately the bids keep rolling in and keep getting higher. So they've gone now from $90,000 to $160,000. So it's a big undertaking. That's just one resurfacing, and they get resurfaced every 5 to 7 years.
Thank you for that. I think Councilmember Richdahl's suggestion of, maybe working with the city to take advantage of our volume discount, so to speak, with vendors like resurfacers is an excellent idea.
I thought that was excellent, yes.
All right. Looks like there's a light on from the Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm okay. Thank you. I just recognized maybe a little more context for staff on my own comments because I don't think I was clear. I think we should be using the courts for the greatest utility that those courts can be used for, which I think is what Winter Lodge is using those courts for. As far as the tennis school, I understand that's the only public tennis school in the region. I mean, that's incredible. The rates are wonderful. The classes for youth and kind of clubs and everything else, I think those should all take precedent, and we should not be getting in the way of that. My point was when the courts are not available, and so maybe some weekdays, I think the speaker mentioned weekdays during school, when the courts are available, not being used for tennis lessons or kids using it, that's when I think it makes sense for us to look back into that and see, should we be renegotiating that and making sure, because I guess a question for staff, members of the public can't reserve public courts, right, elsewhere in the city, or can they? And if they can, does that cost money?
It was my understanding that there's no reservations for the courts, but I do have Director Kristen O'Kane here to confirm that they are free of charge and not able to be reserved.
Good evening, Kristen O'Kane, Community Services Director. That's correct. We do not allow individuals to reserve the tennis courts for individual tennis play, and so of course they're free.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rectal.
Yeah, although we do allow USTA to reserve it when they have tournaments, but that's one exception. Yeah, it is kind of awkward because there's so many facilities that we let people use without a charge. But we have Rinconada Pool, we charge, Foothills Park, we charge. So there are some spattering, but it does seem kind of inconsistent because some we charge and some we don't. And you can argue both ways. Should we have everything be free and taxpayers pay everything, or do we want to charge per fee? How did that work out that we had this public land that we have the nonprofit do the repairs for and the maintenance? Was it ever considered, or was it ever the case where we did the maintenance and the nonprofit just operated it?
In reviewing the history of the lease, it's always been the case that Winter Lodge has fully maintained and operated the courts. But again, I'll call on our real estate services team to correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, nothing to add to that. Yeah, you're right. They've been maintaining, the tenant has been maintaining.
Have we ever done any analysis saying, well, how would this work if we did the maintenance, and what would we have to charge then for the lease?
We haven't done that analysis.
Oh, can Linda, can...
Ms. Jensen?
So in the 1985 voter mandate, it required that the site be operated for recreation, but at no cost to the city. It's also listed in City Ordinance number 3650, which requires the City of Palo Alto to provide this site for community skating, and it be at no cost to the city. Does that answer?
Yep, that is, yep, very good. So even if we wanted to do the maintenance and then charge you more, it wouldn't be, well, could we? If we rolled the maintenance costs into the lease, then that would simplify your life. You wouldn't have to worry about the maintenance.
Meanwhile, I would love that, something like that, because the cost of resurfacing has become so expensive. I think that the mandate of the citizens really stated that it be at no cost to the city, and that the programs should be able to maintain themselves, which was the assertion in the information in the ballot at the time.
Okay, thank you.
Are we ready to do a motion on this?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I move the staff recommendation.
Second. The staff recommendation reads, staff recommends approval of the Winter Lodge tennis contract and to align its term with that of Winter Lodge skating. Vice Mayor?
Offer an amendment to just request staff to explore, to explore free access to the tennis courts when not in use. Doesn't say that it has to be done. I think, as I mentioned, I think deference given to staff to engage Winter Lodge in those discussions through the negotiations, and if it turns out that that is not going to allow the Winter Lodge to be able to honor the agreement in that 1985 vote, thank you, then okay, but maybe when we're able to actually kind of look at the numbers and realize actually this will work and can open up some courts that are actually truly accessible to the public.
I'm happy exploring. Is the seconder happy?
Yep, I accept that. Madam Clerk, the motion is to improve the Winter Lodge tennis lease extension, tennis contract, and to align its term with that of Winter Lodge skating. And with that, I will offer a friendly amendment, which is to direct staff to explore the feasibility of a different maintenance relationship that may be more mutually beneficial.
Yep, I'm happy with that. I accept that.
Okay.
Councilmember Stone, I may have missed your friendly amendment. I apologize.
That was my fault because I started talking while you started typing.
Well, and I turned my motion into an argument for it as well, so my motion was not very clear. And direct staff to engage Winter Lodge through the lease renewal negotiations to explore opportunities to provide free access to the tennis courts when not in use.
Yep, I accept that.
Councilmember Rectal?
Yes.
Councilmember Lithcott-Hames?
Yes.
Councilmember Stone?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, great. Good job, everyone. And let's move on to the second portion of this item, which is the Phase 1, the continued discussion on the Phase 1 process.
And just a reminder that today was just a status report on the Phase 1 that will be continuing as a greater discussion for the council on April 6th.
So as such, no actions required.
I did have a thought that I'd like to share. No action required, but I am confused by the sequencing because when I look at what's coming to council in April, it says City Council approval of P&S Phase 1 improvements. This P&S committee has not opined on this at all. Vice Mayor Stone was on PNS last year when you did all of that hard work, but Councilmember Rectal and I haven't had anything to do with that. So I feel a little uncomfortable with council having a discussion implying that PNS has done more work on it, because we haven't. Am I reading this incorrectly?
So, yeah, to clarify, the Policy and Services Committee did discuss many elements that were presented, including, elements of the application, and other technical type of administrative improvements. And I think that where there was clarity, we would like to resurface that with the council, but certainly could be presented not as a recommendation, but as a discussion, where there was general mutual agreement on direction for those administrative improvements.
Okay. You want my comments on the?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I have a bunch of comments here, not as many as finance.
So actually, if I might interject here, as Ms. Alamos pointed out, our next step recommendation is to bring a study session to the full council, really, quite frankly, to acknowledge the crossover between PNS and finance that has occurred with the new year. And so we saw it as, and do see it as an opportunity to make sure everybody's on the same page as to what will the finance committee's role be, what will the PNS committee's role be in this upcoming budget cycle. So that's the purpose of the next step that if I suspect from your comments, you may be either anticipating that we have answers to tonight, which we won't, or that we'll try to resolve tonight, which again, we're not quite prepared to.
Yeah, I looked at the flow of meetings, and I think it makes sense that you're going back and forth, and finance is allocating the amount and then coming back here. I think it's set up this year clearly. I'm happy with that. So first, you've heard this before. I don't like single-year contracts just because of the lack of continuity, and so I'm glad to see that now we're going in and anticipating how much we're going to have for the next year just to give them a sense of continuity. So that was a good improvement, I thought.
Councilmember Rectal, I'm sorry to cut you off. Let me
Okay.
just interject and try to understand procedurally where we are. So council's got a study session in a month on this. Councilmember Rectal has feedback. Will this feedback potentially inform the staff report, allow things to be clarified more so that this is useful timing for this
yeah.
feedback?
That's a good question, yeah.
Or is council going to direct PNS to come back and do some things, in which case we might bring our analyses then?
Yes, really the latter. So to a certain extent, I think, Councilmember Rectal, if you've got feedback, we could just take it from you offline. But
Okay.
I think the real discussion will be for the full council to give us some feedback at the April 6th study session.
Okay, I was thinking if my suggestions change the report, then an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? But if the report is the report and it's not going to change, then we're kind of wasting our breath tonight.
Yeah, I think I'm hearing and seeing that they would prefer that these comments come later in the sequence.
Okay.
Yes.
But thank you for your work. And you'll have the opportunity to express it all at a later date.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right, so I think with that, item 1 is done. All right, thank you. Now we'll move on to item 2, which is consider policy options to encourage multifamily development in mixed-use districts.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. Jonathan Late, Director for Planning and Development Services. Principal Planner Robert Kane will present this item and speak to the consultants that are available to support us.
Thank you, council members. My name is Robert Kane. I'm Principal Planner in the Department of Planning and Development Services. Next slide, please. Tonight, we're here to talk about Housing Element Program 3.9. It is a program that directs the city to look at ways to incentivize housing in areas that are currently dominated by office use. We're specifically looking at 3.9A, which calls for the city to amend the municipal code to reduce commercial floor area allowances or find other incentives at strategic locations, shifting the economic benefit of development toward housing. Please keep in mind that this is one of about over 100 housing element programs and subprograms. It is not designed to be the primary way that we are encouraging housing in our city, but it is looking at that one specific issue of areas where office is the dominant desire of developers. Next slide, please. So some background, this is stems from our housing element where we received a historically high housing needs allocation for the city. The city also currently has a very high jobs to housing imbalance that we are trying to address through many of the programs in the housing element. Also, office values in Palo Alto are really location specific, and that's one of the things we looked at through this program is different areas within the city. And in some locations, office consistently outperforms housing because it generates such a higher level of returns at those locations. Through this program and through our other programs, the city is really focused on proactive solutions to better align our housing needs and our job growth. And so this is one tool that we could possibly use in our toolkit. Next slide, please. For this program, we looked at 4 different sites and distinct submarkets throughout the city, one each near the Cal train stations at Cal Ave in downtown, as well as a site in the Research Park and a site on Bayshore. For each of these sites, we looked at theoretical residential and commercial maximum build-out under current policy frameworks, and we reviewed what the project value was for each of those projects using a pro forma, and that our consultants confirmed the reasonability of those findings through developer interviews. Now, one of the things that Program 3.9 talks about is mixed-use development, and that could certainly be something we do at any of these sites. But in order to truly understand what levers might be available to the city, we looked at maximizing either housing or maximizing commercial instead of looking at mixed use specifically. Next slide, please. So this table shows the the residual value of the different projects across the 4 different sites. As you can see on 2 of the sites, the office alternative greatly outperformed the housing alternative. And then on one of the sites, the housing greatly outperformed the office. And at the final site, they were closer together, but still with a slight advantage to residential. And so that's sort of the basis that we used for the rest of the analysis, which are detailed in the staff report attachment. Next slide, please. So in these areas where office outperforms residential, we looked at 4 main different levers that the city has at its disposal. One would be fees. We're currently doing a nexus study to review all development fees in the city. And we could, based on the last nexus study, we believe that there's still room to increase commercial fees that could help mitigate some of the desire to develop office. Another option would be a tax that is specifically targeted towards office development. That would require voter approval to enact. A third lever is building standards. We could have higher development standards, including LEED certification and other energy requirements, labor requirements, and other sustainability performances that could increase the cost of developing office and impact that way. And then the last lever is land use regulation, including changes to the zoning, restricting office space. We already have a pretty strict control over office development. So there's a question about how much more we could really do short of eliminating the ability to develop office in some of these locations. But those are the four main areas that are detailed a little bit more in the report that we provided. Next slide, please. So for next steps, we would like this committee to discuss these policy options and provide us with direction of which, if any, you would like us to further pursue. Should you want us to pursue fees, we'll build that into the ongoing commercial linkage fee nexus study, which will be going to council, we anticipate, in early 2027. Should you want us to look at building standards or land use regulations, we'll develop some code amendments that we'll bring to the Planning and Transportation Commission before coming to the council. And should you want us to explore taxes, that will require further study because we'll have to look at how they'll be implemented and how we will time the voter approval piece of that. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. We also have our consultants from Economic and Planning Systems who are here that can answer any questions you have on the financial analysis that was done.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Colleagues, technical questions for staff or the consultants before we go to public comment?
Yeah, just one question. Sorry if I missed it. Just to clarify for the public, what's kind of being proposed tonight are additional policy tools to be able to promote housing growth by trying to restrict office growth. This is in addition to several other kind of policies that I know staff is working on right now, is going to be coming back to the council as far as additional zoning changes and development fee changes for housing projects to also further promote housing growth.
Yes, that's correct. There's a number of initiatives that we've brought to council already as part of this housing element cycle, and more that some of those 100 other programs and subprograms look at to encourage housing development, to remove constraints against housing development throughout the city. This program is specifically only looking at one small piece of that, and that's in the area where the market forces are pushing developers towards office development and away from residential development.
Perfect, thank you. I like how you phrase it. This is just one small piece of the kind of greater work that we're trying to do to really promote multifamily housing in Palo Alto. Because I know we got some concerns from community members that that may have believed that this is kind of the only work that we're doing, and I wanted to make sure that is very clear. No, this is one small piece to it, so thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to public comment.
We have no request to speak and no hands are raised for action item 2.
Thank you. Okay, let's bring it back to the dais for comments on this one item related to, in the midst of the massive set of things we're trying to do to incentivize multifamily housing. Yes.
And if I might, I was just almost stunned when Mr. Kane pointed out, he described it as one of the 100 programs. And I turned to Director Late and said, is it actually 100? He said, well, yeah, it's on that order of magnitude, which the way they've been numbered in the housing element doesn't allow you to sort of total them up. But nonetheless, it is a good illustration of the numerous efforts we have ongoing, and this being one of them.
And they're not going to come one at a time, though, for 100 meetings, are they? Will you batch some of them?
To a large extent.
A lot of them are ongoing efforts that we're working on, but I mean, this is unprecedented, the amount of housing initiatives that we have undertaken over the course of the last 8 years. And with this housing element, there's just really a tremendous amount of additional work that we're doing. And with area plans and incentives, looking at fees, I mean, we're really looking at a huge cross-section of ways to incentivize housing. And again, this is we know that office is a strong economic return in the community. And so that's why I believe this got entered into the housing element program for us to look at it. It doesn't mandate that we do something, and we've presented some options based on our analysis, but looking to the committee to just tell us if anything resonates with you, and if you want some additional feedback from staff on the different options, we're happy to provide that too.
Thank you, Director Late, and thank you to you and your entire team for really the Herculean tasks you have in front of you with this particular housing element. We appreciate it. Okay, Councilmember Rickdahl.
Okay, yeah, thank you for doing this. Like I said, during the housing element, if I was young, I'd want to live downtown and go visit the bars, and if I was retired, I'd want to live downtown and go to the Stanford Theater, or go to the Aquarius. And so there's a lot of areas where housing just would work, and it just historically hasn't, and so we really need to work on that. One thing that didn't surprise me, but still kind of bothered me, is townhouses are very popular, and we see that people, builders love to build them because people like to buy them, but they're very inefficient use of space. If we had more density, we would be able to squeeze in a lot more houses there. And especially with our RENA allocations, if we have wide swaths of, say, San Antonio area built with townhouses, we're not going to make near the progress as we should. So what can we do to disincentivize townhouses, or maybe incentivize density?
So I have a couple thoughts when you mentioned that. One of them is that wasn't specifically what we looked at with this particular analysis, and so you don't have information on that. We didn't look to answer the question of how do we intensify the density and avoid, to encourage rentals over ownership. We really were looking specifically at office and how does office impact housing and those levers.
But like when you were doing your calculations here, you looked at townhouses and said that they were very popular and very...
Yeah, we can certainly invite our economists to come up and speak to the pro forma analysis and how that, factored those outcomes. Rental housing, as we know, has a very different prototype in what they're looking for in terms of their return versus which plays out over decades as developers seek to get their return through rents and rent increases eventually over time, whereas ownership is sales when it's done, and the return is sort of a different layout on that. But I will note, just from a policy perspective, we are taking a look at increasing density at many areas in the city, including the San Antonio area plan, which Robert is also the project lead on that. But ownership housing, townhomes, are actually another source of, entry homes. For some, I mean, they're expensive here in Palo Alto as entry homes, but still they tend to be more accessible. And so having a variety of those housing types is important. Anything else to add? Okay. Would you like the consultant to speak to?
Oh, yeah, if they have something to add.
Good evening, Council. Ben Sigmund, Managing Principal with Economic and Planning Systems. As Jonathan said, the brief for us was about looking at ways to disincentivize office and how that relates to housing. The current moment that we're in with the sort of building cycle definitely favors lower density housing and for sale ownership housing. The townhomes are built almost exclusively with wood construction, 2-3 stories, much less expensive on a per square foot basis to build. And then they are, as you say, very popular in the market. They sell quickly and they sell at a premium, so the economics are very strong. What Jonathan was saying is also true when we switch to a rental product. The tenants are paying a rent, the owner has an operating expense to pay. The overall value per square foot is quite a bit less than condominiums or for sale product. So that influences the economics. And then the costs associated with building at multifamily densities where you get perhaps some structured parking or light gauge steel that might be required to get to the heights. Just on a per square foot basis is a less favorable revenue to cost ratio. So, you know, again, outside of my scope on this, but things we could think about, and most certainly in the other 99 initiatives you'll be looking at, but ways to lower the cost for multifamily developers. You can reduce some of the policy burdens. You can contribute directly to project costs. So that brings those costs down relative to the market values. But right now, across the Bay Area, we are seeing developers come in where they had maybe higher density entitlements, wanting to retrade those for lower density entitlements. When we spoke with the local development community, we spoke with about 4 prominent developer firms here active in Palo Alto. All of them said, we can build more housing if you let us build at lower densities. And what you have to recognize is we're in a market moment. The cycles will change. Multifamily is very likely to come into favor again, but today's economics are very challenging for the dense housing products.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So we have these options of different possible ways of incentivizing residential, and the first one was taxes, and that would require a vote. That I'm not eager to have an election for, and then, so then the next one was the LED, the building standards. Is that kind of like a tax by making it more expensive to build? Are you effectively taxing without a tax?
It does increase the cost of construction if you have a higher standard for development than you do for other standards. But I think what the study found is that you could apply those higher, more rigorous standards and receive some kind of a benefit to the community in terms of a better, higher quality building or achieving some sustainability interests. But I'll note, we didn't get too much into offering, staff analysis on each of these points here, just wanting to let the data sort of fall on its own. But we have a pretty rigorous set of standards with our green building codes, Title 24, of course, the state standards. This would certainly add complexity to the review process and the time it takes us to process applications, including applications that might be part of a mixed-use development, so with housing. So while I like the idea of, having us meet some, rigorous environmental standards or, building standards, I feel like we do that largely today with our existing codes. Could we do more? Sure. Can we incentivize LEED buildings? But we're actually pretty close to some of those things with our existing codes now. And so this is one that is just one of the options that were uncovered in this process, and I think probably known as we went through it, but it's one that, as a sort of administrator of the Planning and Development Services Department, it's one that gives me a little bit of pause just in terms of how we would implement that.
Yeah, it seems almost punitive. If we're not doing it for the lead purpose, then it's punitive. But I understand it was a good thing to look at. I think the biggest thing is if we can just add FAR, limit the office FAR and increase the residential FAR. That to me seems the simplest, and I would think that would be the most effective. Are there things other than FAR that we can do to add density? Is there, for example, could you do heights or other factors, building standards?
Well, so to discourage office?
So, for example, if you had an area with a certain limit of height, we've talked about FAR where you limit the FAR for office, and then you add FAR if you want residential. Are there other aspects of the building code, for example, height, where we're limited right now for office, but we would give them a bonus height if they had residential?
So I think through some of the other initiatives that the city has implemented, we've had the housing incentive program, we've done upzoning with a number of properties. We're looking at some area plans, including downtown, where office is has the greatest, sort of return. We're looking in San Antonio. We have and are currently looking at a number of ways to incentivize housing to achieve that. And of course, you're familiar with SB 79, which is already going to increase those heights. So for this exercise, I think I would focus more on ways of disincentivizing office if we felt like that was something that we needed to do, because we wanted to get more housing in these different areas where office outcompetes housing. But what we're finding from the study is that there's only really a few levers that you can adjust to have some meaningful impact. And you're talking about one of them, and that's the floor area. So where we allow already a fairly modest, amount of commercial floor area at 0.4 throughout most of the city, one could reduce that further, and we don't have a number for you today, but if the committee said, well, this is one that we would be interested in toggling to see if it makes housing more competitive, then that would be something that we would go back and further study. But I think it really is FAR. I don't think there's many other levers to tinker with in this area. And I'll also note that, we got a lot of existing office, in town, and to the extent that we reduce the development standards, we need to be cautious about creating a situation where those properties don't redevelop because they're able to receive a higher rent on those spaces. So if we were to reduce the standards, we're also potentially, freezing in place sort of what's there now.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the simplest thing is to play with FAR, but the two concerns I do have is the grandfathering, because otherwise, if you don't grandfather that existing office in, no one's ever going to redevelop that. They're going to keep that. And so you almost have to be able to grandfather the office and then say, if you redevelop, we'll give you more residential. But unless it's a building towards the end of its lifespan, most people don't want to knock down an office building to put up an office building with additional residential. So it's really hard because the newly built office buildings are probably going to be there for a significant amount of time. The second thing that's uncomfortable is that if you relax FAR for residential, then density bonus kicks in. And so then when you're relaxing that, are you going to, it makes it less predictable what you're offering, since if you just change the base zoning, you aren't necessarily going to get the base zoning. So it really complicates the urban planning to have these other programs that modify your modified zoning.
Yeah, if you're a developer who's done your homework, you're absolutely not going to get just the base zoning FAR. You're going to apply for the density bonuses that allow and try to maximize what you can develop on the site. So you're exactly right. If you increase the residential FARs, that is something that we consistently think about. The housing incentive program was one way to address that because that's an alternative to the state density bonus. But again, here, our focus, again, wasn't looking at how do we further incentivize housing because we're attacking that sort of through many other initiatives. This is really about, do we want to make office more challenging to redevelop? If somebody is looking to redevelop their property, how do we make them think twice about going straight to office versus, maybe I'd like to do housing? And as has been noted, a lot of this is just cyclical, and we just happen to be where we are at the moment where office is not as popular, though we do know that there is interest in Class A office. The quality of the office spaces that are around that might redevelop are different than the new office buildings that are, likely to be built. And we do hear from developers an interest in office development in Palo Alto.
Yeah, we're still getting $9 per square foot of a Class A office, so it's not like office is not what it was 3 years ago, but it's still probably profitable, yeah.
Yeah, and based on your submarket areas, it might even be north of that.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Great, thank you. So really glad to see city has permitted 635 new housing units. Can you remind me, how many do we have in the pipeline right now?
Yeah, we've got a great website that has this information. So if you just give me a quick moment here, or I can just give you a ballpark.
Ballpark's fine.
No, we expect you to have it memorized.
Well, that's why I had this dashboard created, because I want to be able to respond to this question when it comes up. So if you just give me 10 seconds.
Well, yeah, no. I mean,
Here it is. I got it for you. 3,371. That's what we have in the pipeline.
Awesome. Well, and that's why I wanted to have another opportunity to be able to make sure that that number is public, to really show that the policies that we have been working on over the last several years and implementing are paying off. And I think it's a really exciting time for housing in Palo Alto. Clearly, there's a lot more work to be done, so I really appreciate staff bringing forward this, recognizing this is no panacea, and it's a small tool, but a tool nonetheless to hopefully be able to continue to move the needle in that direction. So I think this is meaningful. I agree. I am not interested in the tax, and especially voters are already going to see multiple taxes on this year's ballot, and we don't want to overwhelm them, and so I don't think it's the right time for that, at least in the near term. The land use regulations, seems like we've mostly kind of squeezed all the juice out of that one that we can. So I'm not sure. The two that I am interested in, though, would be the building standards and the fees. And a question on the building standards: do we require? I don't think we do. Do we require PLAs anywhere on any development in the city? Oh, sorry,
No, we don't.
Okay, didn't think so. I think we should absolutely consider that, and I think we should be doing that generally within the city, especially on city projects. But here seems like a great opportunity, if we have not yet introduced that into the city, to require labor contracts in construction projects. This seems like the perfect place to be able to do that. So I would be really excited for that. I think that it is the morally right thing to do, to require that. I think it's good policy. I think it fits within our city goals of livable wages and adequate working conditions, and has the added benefit of incorporating higher business and building standards to be able to make then housing more attractive to developers if we're not implementing this requirement for housing development, at least at the present time. So I'm really excited to explore that, and I think in particular it might be challenging for the full council and community maybe to accept that citywide. So this is a great opportunity to at least try it out. So I'd really like to see that move forward. And then on impact fees, I know impact fees have to have a nexus between the impact and the fee being collected. I know we last completed that nexus study in 2015. We're charging far below what that study said we could charge up to. I think that was $177 a square foot, and we do $68.50. So just, I know we're updating those, or doing another fee study right now. Does staff anticipate that we're likely to see those, I guess, the upper range of those fees significantly higher than they were in 2015, or will that not have changed much?
Yeah, I actually don't know, but I don't expect that they're going to go down.
I don't think so. I do think increasing those fees on office development is a great way to both disincentivize new office and encourage more housing. But then when it doesn't actually disincentivize the housing, we're going to be able to really bring in a lot more fees into our affordable housing, and so I think that's great, and another way to be able to continue to work to reduce the jobs housing ratio, which I actually hadn't appreciated until reading through this staff report, that it's gone down in the last couple of years from 4.18 to 3.19, and I think that is a great thing to be able to celebrate, to again show that our policies are working. So understand this is a small addition to our housing strategy, but I think on the impact fees and requiring the PLAs might be able to help move the needle a little bit in disincentivizing office and encouraging more housing, but also do a lot greater on giving us more money for affordable housing and ensuring that unionized labor is protected and encouraged and well, required in this city for office development. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. I've learned that there's a member of the public who missed our window for public comment. So, Madam Clerk, if you would head over there. But let me just offer my comments to round out what's been set up here. I agree with my colleagues. First of all, thank you for your work. To our consultants, thank you for this work on how to disincentivize office, and to staff for your hard work on this, this being one of 100. We don't want to do a tax for all the reasons mentioned. It sounds like we're already limiting FAR a lot and have square footage caps in place. And I just feel like that's, not something we want to tinker with right now for the reasons mentioned. In terms of design standards, I was like, these are great standards. Skilled, trained labor, LEED, TDM, increased community benefits. Let's use them to disincentivize anyone from building that. I'm a little troubled. I definitely want to see us use unionized labor, but I hate the thought of it being in there as something we think they won't want to do, therefore they'll build what we do want them to build. I'm less interested in changing the design standards to creating great standards to disincentivize the building of the building. I do agree with Vice Mayor on fees. The fact that the last Nexus study showed we're not charging anywhere near as much as we could. I encourage you to look at that for the reasons mentioned. All right, let's turn to the public comment.
Oh, well,
Our
thank you.
speakers.
Oh, sorry, Madam Clerk.
I apologize. Go ahead, Mr. Jeremy.
Thank you, Council, for letting me come late to the party, and thank you to the committee for your time and staff for your hard work. I'm here to support the city's efforts to implement its housing element and further the goal of promoting housing in mixed-use zones, and to think through how the city can build on the work that it's doing. Right now, Palo Alto has a number of housing proposals in the pipeline that reflect the city's good work and recent policies. I really strongly agree with what Vice Mayor Stone said, illustrating how the city's pipeline has developed over time. But this report, which focuses on disincentivizing office, those proposals might have value on their own, but they're not clearly going to further the housing element goal, which is supporting housing in mixed-use zones, because there already isn't a lot of office being proposed in mixed-use zones. There is housing on Cal Ave, on University, that has been proposed, some of it moving forward. I don't know what office proposals there are in the pipeline. So proposals to disincentivize office that isn't being built won't clearly help housing that is. The picture of that pipeline, which is really impressive, is partly a picture of the city's real meaningful progress. It's partly a picture of unplanned housing that came from things like the builder's remedy. And Palo Alto Forward really wants to support the city planning for housing where it wants housing to be built, rather than unplanned state mandates resulting in things that are unpredictable. So some of the things the city is already doing, like studying impact fees for housing and decreasing impact fees on housing, could make an impact on incentivizing housing. Some of the things that the city has started to talk about, like updating its zoning in the downtown area and Cal Ave, can make a big difference. Some things that the city has not talked about as much, like streamlining permitting, can go hand in hand with zoning. The core principle is that in order to fulfill the goal of today's conversation, which is housing in mixed-use zones, the city should really work on facilitating a zoning and fee regime that means that it's quick and easy to build housing in the places it wants. And I know I'm sort of preaching to the choir here, because this is a lot of this, especially after yesterday's council planning meeting is already a work in progress. So I wanted to try and frame this from a pro-housing perspective, how the city can approach the goal in front of it. Thank you for all the work, but again, to the staff and council that you're doing on this, and I look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you. Let me bring it back to the dais for any final questions or comments. Do you need a motion from us, or do you have the recommendations you need?
Yeah, we would need a motion, and I guess depending on the outcome of that, that might dictate sort of our next steps.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I'll move that we I'll move that we forward for council's consideration requiring project labor agreements, PLAs for new office development, additional building standards that may be appropriate, and increase the commercial linkage fee for office development.
Second.
Can I just get while that's being typed up and presented, clarification on when the fee would be updated? Can we associate that with the ongoing work that we're doing?
Yes. Okay. Because that'll be done by next year?
Yeah, probably, hopefully this year. But,
Okay.
We hedged a little bit and said 27 in the report.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, I think we have our motion in front of us. We're ready.
Councilmember Lithcott-Hames?
Yes.
Councilmember Rectal?
Yes.
Councilmember Stone?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
And just a clarification, I'm sorry I didn't catch this before, on B, that should say for new office development as well, noticing it says it for A and C, but not there. I don't want that to be misleading. I think that was the intent of everyone who voted. Yeah. Good, thank you.
Good job, everybody. Let's move on to the next item. Thank you so much, Mr. Kane. Mr. Late, you're staying, right? Okay, you're still here. Switching lawyers, okay, that's always a scary thing. All right, the next item, item 3, is a discussion of the rental registry program first-year report and rent stabilization analysis, including recommendations to the City Council to not expand the rental registry program to properties with 2 or fewer units, and to defer further consideration of a possible rent stabilization ordinance.
We are waiting for a staff member for item 3. Is it okay if we move to item 4 and come back?
I would love to take a brief break.
All right, we can do that too.
Would that be all right? Can we do that?
Yeah.
Let's take how long do you need?
Maybe 5.
All right, let's take 10. Okay, 10-minute break. We are on item 3, which is regarding our rental registry program and the question of rent stabilization. And so we'll turn it over to staff for a presentation.
Yes, we have Ms. Julia Knight here this evening from the Planning Department to make the presentation.
Great, thank you so much. And I'll just note that I'm also joined tonight virtually by my colleague, Rebecca Atkinson, who manages our rental registry program for the city. Next slide, please. Tonight's presentation outlines several renter protection policy options. Staff recommends indefinitely deferring further discussion of expanding the rental registry program or RRP, or establishing a local rent stabilization program at this time. Let's start with the city's prior and ongoing policy work related to renter protections. Next slide. Next slide, please. Council adopted the Rental Housing Stabilization Code in 1980, requiring landlords to offer renters a 1-year written lease. Since then, Council has codified additional protections, including anti-discrimination policies for families with young children, a mandatory renter-landlord dispute response program, relocation assistance requirements for certain evictions, just cause eviction rules, security deposit limits, and most recently, a rental registry program. Next slide, please. The city's policymaking in this area continues with tonight's discussions, as well as an upcoming discussion on a fair chance housing ordinance later this spring. Next slide, please. The rental registry program data from the first program year provides a clearer picture of the city's rental landscape and offers useful insights for tonight's policy discussions. Next slide, please. Year 1 showed that the registry works well at scale. Staff provided support via email, workshops, and one-on-one sessions, while property owners and managers' engagement and follow-through delivered new data and insights on over 7,500 multifamily rental units citywide. Next slide, please. The city launched a public, no account necessary registry lookup tool that lets renters and community members check when a property or unit's registration was last updated, creating a trust and verification feedback loop that supports data quality. Next slide, please. Key housing stock findings from program year 1 included the following. Palo Alto's rental stock is mostly made up of studios and 1-bedrooms. The majority of units are in older buildings, and most units had access to key amenities such as parking, laundry, and outdoor space. Next slide, please. The first year also provided preliminary market data that may help council make data-informed policy decisions. In addition to identifying median market rents for different unit types, the data also found that a little over 5% of units were vacant at some point between October 2024 and April 2025. Just over a quarter of units were either deed restricted, subsidized, such as through Section 8 vouchers, or both. Stanford University owned and operated approximately 1/5 of all multifamily rental housing stock in the city. Additional market and housing stock findings are available in Attachment A of tonight's staff report. Next slide, please. Council directed staff to focus the rental registry program initially on properties with 3 or more units. Expanding the program now to include 1 and 2 unit rentals would add about 4,300 units across 4,200 additional properties, while the program is still working to address some initial implementation challenges. Many of these units are owned by small landlords who may need more hands-on support due to limited experience with rent reporting tools. Staff conservatively estimates this expansion would require increasing staffing from 1 to 2 full-time employees and doubling the current $35 rental registry fee per unit in order to cover these added costs. Next slide, please. Now let's switch gears and talk through staff's analysis of a local rent stabilization program. Next slide, please. State law, specifically the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act of 1995, bars local regulation for rental regulation for single-family homes, condos, and units built after 1995. It also requires vacancy decontrol so that landlords can reset to market rates when a unit turns over. Next slide, please. In addition to other renter protections, the California Tenants Protection Act, TPA, of 2019 provides statewide rent stabilization. California is one of only 3 states to do so, along with Oregon and Washington. The TPA generally applies to units in buildings with 2 or more units that are at least 15 years old, unless those rents are already regulated or restricted by an affordability policy or program. Annual rent increases are capped at the lower of 10% or 5% plus inflation. This is currently 7.7% in Palo Alto. Next slide, please. Because of the state-level policy framework Palo Alto would need to work within, the city would only be allowed to decrease the allowable annual rent increase below the levels set by TPA, apply rent increase limits to owner-occupied duplexes and possibly mobile homes, and/or allow renters and landlords to petition to change allowable increases. Next slide, please. This graphic demonstrates the restrictions within which a local rent stabilization program would need to operate. Next slide, please. Analysis of the rental registries program's first-year data suggests that most market rate units experienced no rent change and that most renters had been in their current unit for under 4 years. Next slide, please. Staff reviewed the scope, staffing, and operating costs of rental stabilization programs in similar nearby peer cities, as shown here. Next slide, please. Based on these analyses, staff estimates that a local rent stabilization program in Palo Alto would require approximately 6 full-time employees and a $2 million annual program budget. If the city wanted to recover most or all costs related to this program through the rental registry program fee, the fee for covered units would need to increase from approximately $35 today to over $300 per unit. Next slide, please. Standing up a local rent stabilization program would require staff across several departments to develop specialized functions, administrative procedures, and enforcement tools. It may also require the creation of a new housing-focused group within the city and/or a new elected or appointed board to help resolve rent stabilization-related disputes. A general fund loan would be needed to initially fund the program, though cost recovery would be possible over time through increased rental registry fees, as mentioned. Next slide, please. Tonight's staff recommendation is that the Policy and Services Committee discuss and provide feedback on the findings for the first year of the rental registry program and the related rent stabilization analysis, and recommend the council defer indefinitely an expansion of the rental registry program to properties with 2 and fewer units, and further analysis or preparation of a draft ordinance related to possible implementation of a local rent stabilization policy. Next slide, please. Thank you for your time. This concludes my presentation. As I mentioned, my colleague Rebecca Atkinson is here with me tonight, and her information is also available on this slide. We'll answer any questions you may have related to these policy topics. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Knight. Technical questions from my colleagues before public comment? Okay, seeing none, Madam Clerk, do we have any members of the public who wish to speak?
We currently have 5 requests to speak. Our first speaker will be Martha S., followed by Anil B.
Good evening. My name is Martha Stern, and I am the owner and manager of a 7-unit residential building here in Palo Alto. I've owned the building close to 18 years. I'm doubtful that the benefits of the rental registry, often turning into rent control boards, outweigh the costs. I imagine it's interesting to accurately know the level of rents, the number of vacancies, and the degree to which certain rental activities, like evictions, take place. But the fees placed on the rentals in order to get more data and to fund one or two administrative positions with the town do end up getting paid by the renters, the very people that boards claim to want to help. It's no secret that the cost of living in the Bay Area is among the highest in the country. In addition to property tax, my property insurance went up close to 140% for worse coverage from 2023 to 2025, and I feel rather lucky that I got away with just a little more than a double increase. Of course, the costs of getting anything repaired or upgraded continue to increase, as do utilities and other expenses. The $35 per unit annual fee placed on each unit will be passed on to my tenants. As the state already has a fairly restrictive rent increase ceiling, I implore the City of Palo Alto to just leave it to the state and not take it further. Living here myself and feeling the rising cost of living firsthand, I'm very aware that my tenants are feeling the same cost pressures. I'm also cognizant that it costs me money every time a unit turns over, so I proactively do not raise rents other than what is needed to recover the increased costs to run the building. This translates to 1 to 3% increases per year. This is knowing that if something significant hit, I could raise rents to help share in that specific cost. But if I was restricted to, say, 1 to 2% like Mountain View, then I would be inclined to raise the rents to the maximum allowable every year in order to bank for higher cost situations like the property tax situation a couple of years ago, or the property insurance situation. Rent control disincentivizes everyone. I may have a rental already built, but if I'm further restricted in income, it will impact how well I keep the building maintained beyond fundamental safety requirements, of course. As a final point, these administrative exercises often have unintended consequences. The rental registry has made it really easy for other organizations, such as the fire department, to conduct annual safety inspections. I just got a $488 bill for a 3-minute inspection. That $488 will also get passed on to my tenants. I, of course, don't have an issue with fire safety per se, but the public listing does open up exposure to all kinds of charges for a myriad of reasons, all of which will be passed on to the tenant who you say you want to help. Thank you very much for considering my comments.
Our next speaker is Anil B., followed by Eileen.
Good evening, Committee Chair and committee members. My name is Anil Babar. I'm with the California Apartment Association, and I'm here to support the staff recommendation and to thank them for the work that went into this report. The rental registry program was adopted to provide data about what is actually happening in Palo Alto's rental market so that the city can make informed policy decisions. The data shows Palo Alto's housing providers are making rent decisions based on the market, and that market has led to nearly 2/3 of market rate units receiving 0 rent increases, and a quarter of them is receiving a rent increase below 5%. So I ask you, what is the problem that you're trying to solve with rent control? When adopting the registry, the council called for decisions to be grounded in data. The recommendation to defer indefinitely work on a rent stabilization program is a data-driven one. I'd also like to point out that about a comparative study that was done by the LA Times comparing LA and San Diego and why San Diego has higher development and higher unit count than LA does. And that analysis was concluded that it was in part due to the fact that LA has rent control and San Diego doesn't. Adoption of a rent control ordinance would make your efforts to incentivize multifamily production much harder and ultimately add to the policy burden that you're trying to reduce, not increase. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Eileen. Eileen, you should now be able to unmute yourself.
Good evening, Council. My name is Eileen Kim. We can all agree the City of Palo Alto needs a vibrant rental market. I'm here to talk about the hidden barrier you are creating even before buildings are built. A vibrant market is one defined by growth and trust, not by expensive, redundant government surveillance. Currently, Palo Alto is building a shadow registry program that creates a climate of surveillance and bureaucracy that deters the exact mom-and-pop housing that you want. This program is an exercise in redundancy. California already has a robust statewide rent control called under AB 1482. Half Moon Bay and Hayward paused and rejected their registries because they realized it was too heavy for a city of their size and an exercise in redundancy. The city is spending public funds to build a shadow registry for information that exists for free on platforms such as Zillow, Trulia, and MLS. Please consider what you are doing that's available for free. Also, in March 2026, the staff report explicitly says that this registry does not demonstrate a pattern of widespread acute rent increases. In fact, 63% of market rate units report a zero rent change over the past year. The data is clear, yet the fiscal logic is non-existent. You have created a rental shadow registry, one which requires to administer a local rent stabilization ordinance using the registry that will cost taxpayers $2 million a year. Repeat this, $2 million a year for a solution to search for a problem that doesn't exist. You're burning taxpayer money for something that exists for free. Such a massive administrative, fiscal, irresponsible behavior during this time where people are feeling the pinch of the dollar, you should highly reconsider what you are doing with taxpayer money. You should follow the lead of cities like Claremont and Pomona, which rejected these programs after realizing the administrative burden and the data honeypot privacy risks far outweigh the theoretical benefit. Also, please consider when a homeowner considers building an ADU, they're not just thinking at construction costs, they're looking at long-term headache of being a landlord. They see the reward is creating a new unit as mandatory government registry, an annual participation fee that's now going to cost $300 per unit, an invasion of their privacy. They're simply not going to build. It creates a barrier to the very housing you want to create. Fourthly, this alarming creation of a data honeypot. Under the California Public Records Act, any data the city collects, names of owners, property owners, landlords, addresses, tenants, lease details can be subpoenaed and requested by anyone. You are creating a public directory of exposes residents to data brokers, predatory marketing. Claremont and Pomona both rejected these programs because of the administrative benefit is not worth the massive sacrifice of personal privacy and the legal liability of the city. Please consider discontinuing this rental registry program. Please be a leader in production, not prohibition. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jennifer L., followed by Hamilton H. Jennifer, you should now be able to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Dear committee members, I'm a Palo Alto resident for 26 years. I support the proposal to remove rent control from the city's agenda. I heard your discussion about promoting housing growth just now. If you want to do that, please create policies to attract investors to build housing and don't do rent control. Rent control will scare investors away. Number two, rent control never works anywhere in the whole world. Although it protects some people temporarily who are already in rent control units, it makes people hard to find housing to move. It's really bad for the economy. Third, rent control is not necessary for Palo Alto. According to the data that you just showed, most didn't even increase the rent at all, and others only increase moderately. Number four, now the cost of owning homes increased crazily. My insurance cost just went up more than double just in the past year. Other expenses like maintenance and utilities are also increased significantly. Last but not the least, rent control is awfully expensive. I saw that it takes $2 million to implement. Do we have such money to waste? No. Please do Palo Alto taxpayers and residents a favor. Don't do rent control, please. Thank you very much.
Our final speaker is Hamilton H. Hamilton, you should now be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. I want to support the staff's thoughtful recommendations, especially the not expanding to one-person units, which are basically individuals who are non-professional property managers. These people are busy taking their kids to soccer games, working incredible overtime, and just trying to hold their life together. And they don't have time. In addition, if they're going to have to go through this bureaucracy, they're going to take a second look at doing Airbnb, regardless of whether it's whether it's legal or not. So I think it does push people towards Airbnb. I don't get it. Like, there's no this whole rent thing was supposed to be because landlords were gouging residents, and you get the data, you find out they're not raising rents, or they're raising rents very little. So this theoretical problem turns out not to be the case now that you have the data. So why are you going to raise every single unit in the city by $265 per unit so you can collect the data to further confirm that the rents are not being raised by very much? Secondly, the city has a major budget issue right now. If I was to look at the value add of adding these positions versus all the other positions that could be added within the city, I don't think this even compares to the headcount elsewhere. And again, these are just individuals. These are not professional managers. Lastly, I think that the issue about privacy is very good. You're just creating a lot of privacy that the data brokers, private data, the data brokers can get their hand on. And the last thing is, when they showed a rough draft of what it would look like for individuals, they're asking us about how much we charge for laundry, how much we charge for parking, completely out of touch with an individual renters who just have a flat fee. Maybe they have a pet fee at most, but they wanted us to fill out this long form designed for multifamily professional properties. So I hope you go with the staff recommendation and realize that the problem isn't here. This isn't a good use of effort and funds. There's much more valuable things the city could be doing. And thank you so much for listening to my comments.
That concludes public comment on item 3.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll bring it back to my colleagues. Who'd like to go first? Councilmember Rector.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. The rental registry, from a policy standpoint, it's really good information. Some things that surprised me were that we have a lot of people who've been in the same apartment for 10 years. I didn't expect that. But the other thing that really surprised me, 20% of the apartments are run by Stanford. Is that recent, or do we have any, I guess this is the first year, but do you have any feeling, anecdotally even?
I will just say that we would need to circle back with Stanford to confirm this, but the building years for those buildings are like 25 or more years old. So that makes me think that about half that was a building that was built in 2001. So I'm guessing that they built it in 2001 and been operating those 700 units since then. So I would say that Stanford has probably been a significant share of this market for a while.
I'm guessing that's Stanford West on San Antonio Road.
Yes, yep.
Or Sandhill Road.
Or Sandhill. Yeah, and then the other big one is Welch, and there's one other. But it's 3 large buildings, 2 around 700 and 1 around 100 units. Okay. 3 large buildings.
Yeah, and so I love the data. I'd love to have data for 1 and 2 bedroom, but the cost just doesn't justify it. So I think keeping it status quo is the way to go. And maybe down the road with technology and process, we can improve it and make it simpler. And because also we don't want to be onerous from that, spending a lot of time filling out stuff. So I support not expanding it to 0 or 1. Then the rent control or rent stabilization, that's all very, very complicated. I don't see the need for it. I would prefer not to have it. There's unintended consequences everywhere. I don't see the problem that we're trying to solve, so I also agree with your assessment not to expand that, not to start that.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Stone, any comments?
Sure, yeah. I mean, generally, I support the staff recommendation for this. I was always a very big supporter of the rental registry program and knew that it was going to be bringing in really important data for us. The reason why I supported so much is given that about half of our community rents, a lot of our decisions are going to impact renters. I am a renter. I think I'm one of those that's been in my apartment for over 10 years now. I can't believe. And sadly, I'm probably a lifelong renter in this community. And so the need to be able to have informed decisions on what we're doing for renter protections is absolutely critical. But I would say the rental registry has surpassed even my expectations as far as how effective it has been in getting us that data, and the registration rate in the first year is incredible. I mean, I remember speaking with council members in Mountain View, trying to get advice from them on what we needed to do to be able to make that happen. I can't remember what their response rate was in that first year, but it was not 97.9%. Is it even that now for them? Not that it's a competition, but so I think just credit to staff for that, and credit to our property owners for being responsive and giving that information. And so on the kind of the issues in front of us, again, I've always been a big supporter on kind of common sense renter protections, and we have done so much of that in this community over the last several years that is really helping. When it comes to the renter protection ordinance, I need to stick with the whole reason why I supported the registry in the first place was we need to make informed decisions based on the data. And at least at the moment, and right, this is always very fluid and things will change over the can change in the future, but at the moment at least, it doesn't appear like there is a strong need to continue pursuing a renter stabilization ordinance. And in particular, for a couple reasons. One, the data just doesn't show that it is necessary at the moment, and then the other one is just the significant costs associated with it, and that the fact that we won't be able to get to a full cost recovery probably by the time that we are coming out of our projected deficits really alarms me. So I think for a future council to be able to revisit this maybe at that time if the rental registry shows a need in the future, but I think for now it doesn't. And then on expanding the rental registry to 1 and 2 units, I agree with Councilmember Rectal. I think that data would be really helpful, and we do have a large amount of renters who rent single-family homes, but I don't think of all the things that this city needs to accomplish on the budgets that we're working with, I don't think that is a top priority at the moment. So what worries me is the delay indefinitely, but I guess that just means delay to not a time certain. Okay, seeing the planning director give me that thumbs up. So recognizing that is something that will come back in the future.
Yeah, and I'll just note the annual report that we have, whether we do a dashboard or send a transmittal to the council, I think that will provide some insight as to whether we need to revisit the issue at some point.
Perfect. And I'll just say, the council at the time got a lot of pressure from many landlords in the community, really rejecting the rental registry and being very concerned about that. And I understand, nobody wants additional work, but I know those same landlords do not want a renter stabilization ordinance, and to just be able to point out it is because of the rental registry that we are now able to have this data to be able to say, yeah, a renter stabilization ordinance is not necessary at this time. So understand not wanting it, but it is now helping us make this informed decision to say, it's not time. And so appreciate, again, all the work from staff and really the whole community of getting us this information. And yeah, work continues.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'll just add, I agree with my colleagues in terms of expanding the rental registry to go after the 1 and 2 bedrooms, which are single-family homes around single-family home properties. I happen to be a landlord for the first time in my life, having built a permitted ADU in the city of Palo Alto and renting it to a third party. And we are not professional property managers, and I might find it challenging to deal with this administrative requirement. That's an N of 1, but I relate to the public commenter who expressed that concern, knowing that staff would have to increase from 1 to 2 FTE on that, doubling the fees, maybe the fees going as high as 300. I imagine getting compliance on these units would be challenging, and knowing that the cost would ultimately be passed on to the tenants, we don't need to be doing that. And the rent stabilization, I thought the staff report put it very well. There was a quote, arguably, these findings suggest that existing state protections aimed at keeping rent increases below 10% or 5% plus a percentage change in cost of living, if that's lower, for covered units are functioning largely as intended for the majority of Palo Alto's registered rental units. Really put a nice cap on that. I did have one question, which is, excuse me, how is the fair chance ordinance that's coming related to this, different from this, enhancing of this in this space that we're talking about right now?
The way I would think about it is that the fair chance ordinance, should it move forward, would provide additional anti-discrimination protections for renters. So it's not going to regulate rents, but it is going to create more opportunities for more people of diverse backgrounds with diverse histories to access the rental market in Palo Alto.
Thank you. I'm asking only because it was mentioned earlier as connected. All right. So I think with that, we are ready for a motion. Who's ready to make it?
Okay, I will move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Councilmember Stone?
Yes.
Councilmember Lithcott-Haynes?
I just want to point out that he's the vice mayor. He's been called council member.
I apologize.
I don't want him to feel demoted and maybe quit, so. And you called on me? I'm a yes.
Yes. Councilmember Rechtel?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for your work. All right, we are on to our last item, which may prove not to be much of an item at all. Item 4. Right. You, it's going to be you. Well, what's it called? Let's see.
And this item will be City Auditor, Ms. Murdoch, who's online.
She is, okay. What I'm noticing is we had an add places that changes the name of the item from what's in the agenda. Should I acknowledge that change?
I don't think it was intended to change the title of the item. Perhaps that was in error, but in any case, it certainly changes the discussion you'll have.
So the item is recommended approval of new task order 4.42, flock safety assessment for inclusion in the city auditor's FY26 audit plan and amend FY26 task order budgets to support this new task order with a net zero financial impact.
Yeah.
I'd love for the city auditor to get us going. Ms. Murdoch.
Sure. Good evening, committee members. So as you'll note, we submitted a supplemental report recommending the committee remove agenda item 4 from consideration. We do think the proposed engagement for the city to review Flock as a vendor is important, but following our standard process, Baker Tilly has completed its conflict of interest check. And upon review, we concluded that it's appropriate for Baker Tilly to recuse itself from this assessment to avoid any potential appearance or concern that this might impair our independence. So as the city and the vendor coordinate to set the scope for the assessment, we can assist as needed by recommending specific firms that would be able to conduct this work. And Baker Tilly will also commit the previously identified funds for the proposed assessment from the city auditor's contracted budget.
Thank you, Ms. Murdoch. Questions from colleagues for Ms. Murdoch before we go to public comment?
Maybe more of a procedural question for the city manager as far as, does that mean then to continue this item? I'm just kind of confused about the recommendation.
Yes, it does certainly throw us a curve. And that said, I think what is clear is Baker Tilly will not be able to proceed with the audit as we had recommended and they have initially proposed. So given that, I think we do have this item for, as an opportunity for public input, as well as for a recommendation from the committee if you were to want to make such a recommendation for the council on next steps, which again could be to continue the work with an audit that would involve a different auditor and authorize staff to proceed with that, and any other comments you'd like to make.
That's helpful, thanks.
And I'll just add through the chair. The remainder of the item that's up for discussion is, as the city manager alluded to, whether or not the committee would like to recommend to go forward with an audit, perhaps the scope of that audit, but a general discussion of sort of the benefits of ALPR, whether or not to move forward with the flock contract is beyond the scope of this agenda item. So if the committee wanted to have that discussion, the way forward would be to request that that be agendized at a future council meeting, or that the council refer that work back to this committee for future discussion.
Thank you. Let's go to public comment.
We currently have 5 requests to speak. Our first speaker is Austin P., followed by David P.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's reset his time as well, please.
Sure, yeah. So I don't have my prepared statement because I was going to say that it was entirely inappropriate for Baker Tilly to conduct an audit under the circumstances. So I appreciate the auditor coming forward with that. But I do want to say that I'm not sure that there's potentially any audit that could assuage my and many others' concerns about flock or ALPRs in general and mass surveillance. And so I would actually encourage you to not pursue that. And instead, let's focus on potentially canceling the contract. And I know that that's not particularly on the agenda for discussion tonight, but I just want to make the point that if you were to move forward with any sort of audit, the outcome of that doesn't remove the inherent risks. And so I would caution you from relying on that for making any future decisions. So, thank you.
Our next speaker is David P., followed by Kara S. David P.
Yes. Hi, thank you. I appreciate your patience, and nice to see you again. I realized when I spoke earlier I didn't identify myself. I'm David Page from Midtown, and my wife and I have lived here for decades. The agenda item, as I thought I understood it before the recusal, was that you guys want to have an audit to help you decide about the contract that's coming up for renewal in June. And I know that in the work that comes before the council, things are often more complicated than they appear to a simple-minded resident like myself. But there's also, on the other hand, an importance of looking at what's the morally right thing to do, to quote Vice Mayor Stone from earlier tonight. And I think all of you know, you've been informed and you've seen the news about the nefarious behavior that ICE has been involved in over the past 12 months. Given that, I would say there's not really much point in having an audit if you already understand that the ICE is going to be getting the data from Flock, and we are voluntarily giving that over to them. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't think it makes sense to most of my fellow residents. Maybe sense is the wrong word. Maybe it's not the right thing to do. And I assume most of your council members would agree with that. And in that case, what's the point of having the audit? You can shut off the cameras as of tonight, tomorrow. I don't know who you have to call or get in touch with, but shut off the cameras for Flock and shut off the contract in June. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Kara S., followed by Hamilton H.
Hi there, Policy and Services Committee, Cara Silver, long-term Midtown resident. Thank you to the auditor for recognizing this clear conflict of interest. It's unfortunate that it wasn't done earlier because all of the data for that conflict of interest was in the staff report. I do want to say that I agree with the earlier comments from the public that this audit doesn't seem necessary. There are there's a lot of information already on the problems with Flock. As you know, to set the stage, SB 54, which is California's sanctuary state law, prohibits cities from sharing personal information about immigration status with ICE. And the proposed audit fails even to get at this particular issue. The issue is, what does Flock do with the data that it collects from the city? There are lots of reports that Flock has taken the data and submitted it to federal agencies. There was a situation just recently in Denver where that was done with Colorado's ALPR data. So there have been many different breaches. Other cities have recognized that this has been a problem. Other cities have taken the leadership role of canceling their contracts. Mountain View has done that, Santa Clara County, Santa Cruz, Los Altos Hills, and Alameda County has delayed entering into a contract. Most recently, Denver canceled its Flock contract due to this issue with the information being provided to Border Patrol. And given the situation with the federal government, there is no regulation of the ALPR system. The state has no regulation. There was a proposed statute that was passed by the legislature, and Governor Newsom recently vetoed that. So there is really no guardrails on what happens with this data. I'd like to state that in Palo Alto, one of the cameras is located on Embarcadero and El Camino Real, our First Amendment corner, so to speak. And it is it is rolling around, and we have had numerous protests in that area. And I do urge the council to turn off the cameras at this point. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Hamilton H. Hamilton, you should now unmute yourself.
I strongly support the city to conduct a flock safety assessment audit and have several suggestions to strengthen it. First, Baker Tilly recusing themselves as a potential auditor is a positive development, since the public needs to have full confidence in the independence of the auditors. Second, the audit should assess whether at least 2 PAPD staff are trained to the highest administration level so the system can be properly configured and monitored at all times. And third, as noted in the staff report, PAPD administrators should review new software releases and release notes promptly to ensure settings remain properly configured. Some residents have asked the city to shut down the system. I disagree. Only 30 days of data is retained before the data is purged on the flock servers. Per the assistant chief, we have checked to the extent we are able to on our end and do not believe any out-of-state agency searches resulted in the PAPD data being shared. Beyond that, Flock has reported that their back-end audit shows no Palo Alto data generated being shared as a result of an out-of-state agency search. Data obtained from ALPR is only accessible to properly trained staff with legitimate enforcement needs. All queries are logged and subject to audit. Since March 2025, all out-of-state access has automatically been disabled across all Flock systems in California. ALPR cameras make our community safer. They alert police in real time when a stolen or wanted vehicle enters the city, helping investigators identify offenders faster, recover stolen property, and reduce additional victims. They can also deter crime because offenders sometimes avoid cities known to use license plate readers. As our assistant chief noted, ALPRs have helped the Palo Alto Police apprehend violent felons, recover stolen property, locate missing persons, and solve a string of dozens of residential burglaries. The audit is important and should be done well. But in the meantime, the system is improving public safety, and there is no evidence of improper data sharing of Palo Alto data, so the system should remain in operation. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Art3M351A. You should now be able to unmute yourself.
Good evening. Sorry that my screen name is very unpronounceable, but I'm Ann M. And unlike the previous speaker, I'm against these ALPR cameras. And I want to just say that, why do you need to do an audit? It is a backward-looking operation because you don't know what's actually happening. As many of the cities in our county have found, there have been leaks from flock data, despite the assertion that there is no public sharing of data. The other, Kara mentioned all of the examples across the country of this happening, and the very fact that we're considering an audit means that we're not sure. So I'm very happy that Baker Tilly has recused themselves. I think that's proper. But I do support the city auditor and the city police department take a look at what's been happening with the data from these flock cameras. And I would just also echo the previous speakers in saying that I believe that we should remove the inherent risk and danger presented by the cameras to our First Amendment rights and to our privacy, and that the camera should be capped and turned off until these issues are resolved. Thank you.
Our final speaker is David. David, you should now be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, hello. So I am in favor of an audit if we must, but I would much prefer if we simply canceled, like many of the other speakers. Flock has shown themselves to not be a good actor, and they have been caught lying repeatedly. If we are going to take this step of an audit, I think that there are some questions that we really need answered that Flock has obfuscated and lied about on previous audits and at public comment at forums like this that I've attended. One, how does Flock ensure that future changes to their system will not lead to sharing outside of California or outside of the city? One thing that we've seen is they make changes frequently. And when those changes come in, it's kind of like when you get opted into a notification that you didn't want or an email that you didn't want because the company changed something. So we need clarity about how the city can protect our data. How can the city ensure that federal law enforcement cannot gain access to the system, including by unauthorized credential sharing by in-state agencies? Credential sharing is rampant in the Flock system, and we need to know how exactly we're going to prevent that. I'm mostly concerned about outside agencies, but within the department itself, it would also be valuable. 3, what will cities' data be used for, with a specific focus on machine learning and sale of data, both during the contract terms and after them? We believe that Flock retains data as specified in their policies and contracts after cancellation, and they can do whatever they want with it. They can trade AI models to recognize certain cars or people or people with certain characteristics, and we need significantly more clarity on what exactly they're going to ask for. We also need more clarity on what access in-state federal agencies will have to our data. I'm thinking about things like San Diego ICE, who is actively deploying their own ICE cameras all over San Diego County, and very clearly is using the system, and I would be shocked if they don't have access to other regional police departments' data. So if we're going to do an audit, let's make it thorough.
That concludes public comment on item AA1.
Thank you. Colleagues, thoughts? I think, well, I'll just open by saying we wanted to do this audit for good and valid reasons. We had some concerns based on what we're hearing that led us to ask for an audit. We've now learned we can't do the audit with our auditor because they have a conflict. So now the question is, do we want to recommend that the city carry forward with an audit with a different vendor? Or are there other, is there a larger question? The question of the contract with Flock itself. That's not agendized for us to discuss tonight, but we can recommend that it be agendized at a council conversation. And that's personally what I would be in favor of. I think the entirety of the question needs to be before us and soon.
I agree the entire question needs to come before the council. I'm curious from staff's perspective when that could be agendized, when could we possibly get this audit, how quickly an audit like this could be completed. I know now we need to go out and seek bids for another auditor, or maybe not, I don't know, but I'm worried about the the pacing of this, and then the challenge of the council making a full decision while an audit is pending seems to be a bit strange, and the possibility, can we just turn the cameras off while waiting for an audit or waiting for a full council decision? I think there's just kind of so many there's so many questions and unknown answers to make this decision.
Appreciate that. Let me try to tackle the ones that are more discrete. Let's start with our ability to proceed with an audit. If we are able to determine an alternative service provider that is at that same order of magnitude of the $30,000 identified by the auditor, then we could actually proceed with that with staff authorization. We would not need to get council approval. So we would, depending on the feedback and ultimately your motion tonight, if you wanted us to proceed with that, we would. And so that's step one. In terms of getting it onto the council agenda, as Vice Mayor knows, our agendas are pretty packed through June. So we would look to, again, committee's sense of how urgently you see this needing to be placed onto the council's agenda. There has been a misunderstanding, if I might describe it that way, that our contract ends in June. That is not accurate. Our contract extends for at least another year or two. So that is not a time-sensitive milestone that we are expecting. So let's see. I think the last piece in terms of sort of the chicken and egg, which comes first, if the council does want to give, or perhaps if the council does not have a discussion at a staff level, I think we would say we have an ongoing operation. We have steps that we had recommended and would recommend continuing in order to ensure we have confidence in that operation. So that would be our baseline next step. We would not be suggesting that the cameras be shut off absent further council direction.
That's helpful, and I mean, I do think this is an important enough issue that is nuanced enough that deserves a public debate, and to be able to allow the community to be able to provide their own input when they are the ones that are also being surveilled in the streets, and the very reasonable concerns that this data is being used inappropriately by other agencies and federal immigration agencies in particular. So I do think I think it's a decision that the full council needs to make. But I think the timing of that does require, I don't see the point of spending money on an audit to then make that decision without the information from the audit. And I do agree, some of the speakers mentioned the need to expand the scope of that audit to ensure that it is covering kind of just that real basic question of what is Flock doing with the data? Is it being shared? I know I've had conversations with our acting police chief to ensure me that that our data has not been, and that's I think the public needs to be more aware of that as well. But all of these safeguards are critical. So I think the audit needs to take place, and the council needs to be able to make that decision. I'm trying to follow the rules as the city attorney is, yes, directing me. There's much more I want to say, but I know it's not agendized, so no problem.
Yeah, I mean, ALPRs have so much risk associated with them, especially with the current government going on. But it also, we see that they're solving crimes. They have really good potential. So they have this potential for good and bad. And that smells like something that the independent police auditor should be overseeing. Would they have expertise to be able to audit how we are doing our use of Flock?
We could certainly engage in a conversation with the police auditor to determine whether they feel that they have the expertise needed in this area. I would note that it is different from what we have typically relied on our IPA to do.
Yeah, I'm not talking about like going in and looking at the source code. I'm talking about looking at our policies, looking at how we use Flock, using how we interface with other cities. I think that would be in their expertise.
Yes, looking at Palo Alto PD's procedures and our adherence to it is certainly squarely within the type of work that they would do. I would note that the audit as scoped is more focused on Flock and their both code as well as their operational policies and interface with their users.
Yeah, independent of audit, I would think, independent of a Flock audit, I would think in having the independent police auditor overseeing this would be a reasonable thing to add to their job jar. But that's something we can look into. But I mean, overall, the one important thing is that we have not lost any data outside of all of our license plate data has stayed inside. And that wasn't just luck. When this first came, the previous council worked really hard, and the police department worked really hard and being very paranoid. And our policies are much more robust. The fact that you need an MOU to share. If someone's on the Flock, they can go search for San Diego's license plate readers. A Flock user can't search for Palo Alto's. So we fundamentally constrained ourselves. We put up safeguards that other cities didn't. And so the fact that our data wasn't used wasn't dumb luck. We made that luck with hard work and paranoia. And so I think that we should give some credit to both the previous council and also to the police department. I think we did a really good job.
I'll just add to my colleagues' thoughtful comments. I remember that conversation where we did the hard work and how important it was to us to ensure that if we were going to go forward with this innovative technology to protect the community from crime, that we wanted to be sure we were safeguarding the data. And we had such confident assurances from very qualified colleagues in PAPD that we were putting an agreement in place that was going to protect us. And I think our city only shares 30 days worth of data and others share much longer. So to your point, we've done the hard work. I'm finding myself struggling. I don't want us to be lemmings that run off a cliff because, we see all these other cities in front of us, but I don't want to find ourselves having really missed a risk, failed to appropriately assess and shut down the risk if it's there. So I am feeling an urgency for it to come, for this larger question of the contract with Flock to come before council sooner rather than later. It just feels odd to me to be reading about so many cities and the county, making this decision, and for us to not do that with kind of all deliberate speed concerns me. But that may just be my looming overarching concern about the federal government. So I may be being a little bit too irrational on this, but sooner rather than later would be my request.
I agree with the chair that my preference would be for this to come sooner rather than later, and I also share your distrust of federal immigration agencies and the work that they're doing, preying on our communities. Can any estimate? I know this is tough since staff is not our auditor and our auditor is recused. So any estimate then on potential timeline of being able to turn around an audit and then be able to have that council discussion within a reasonable timeline? Or I really liked Councilman Rectal's idea of the IPA weighing in. Maybe that's sufficient while the full audit is being completed. I just feel that conversation without real sufficient data to inform us, it's going to be very easy to do it, to kind of follow when we're so used to kind of leading. And I do think there are real competing interests. And I know our police department has talked about the amount of crimes that have been solved or prevented, and we don't even know how many have never even taken place because criminals have chosen to avoid Palo Alto. In fact, just yesterday, I was just scrolling through CNN, and there was a story about a triple homicide out of Colorado that was near the Four Corners. So all those states, there's a triple homicide that was actually that the killer was caught because of flock camera data being able to be shared, and so that might be an extreme example, but we know it has worked in ways that we intended it to work, and our safeguards have worked in the way that the council had intended those to work. But I agree with the chair that there are these other risks, and it's a balancing act, and so that needs to be a council decision to be able to figure out which way that balancing act goes. But I think we're going to want to have real data to be able to support that, and maybe that's the IPA, or maybe that's the audit. But it's going to be a challenging decision, I think, for many on the council and this community. So I don't know if staff has any. I gave you a little time. I was filibustering a bit.
Sure, absolutely. Well, you also provide some food for thought there. So I think we could certainly proceed with both in parallel, contacting the independent police auditor while also pursuing the audit, and with the understanding, with this feedback of the sense of urgency that we would like to bring the information from both resources to the council's discussion.
And you wouldn't need a motion for that?
Actually, we don't. I think, again, if it ends up being higher than our delegated contract dollar limit, then we will need to come back to the council for approval, but we should know that fairly quickly and be able to advise the council on as progress is being made.
Thank you for that. My concern for any member of the public listening to this or reading about this tomorrow is there's a lot that's going unsaid, in part because this item isn't agendized for us to talk beyond the audit. I do know that our acting police chief is here, and I wonder if there's anything, and I'll look to our legal counsel, that he could provide by way of a description of his sense of the relationship between the city and Flock. Like, we were going to do an audit. If he was to opine on, it's important that we do the audit, here's what we think of the agreement we've entered into. Is that permitted or no?
If the acting chief has information that he'd like to share about what the scope of the audit could include and why that information is sort of within the proposed scope of the audit, I think that would be appropriate here. But broader discussion about, as you put it, the city's relationship with Flock is probably out of bounds for this discussion and would be better placed at a discussion where that's, agendized and noticed for all the members of the public who would want to come and hear that and participate in it.
Okay, I think I am asking a question I shouldn't be asking. So, Acting Chief Reif Schneider, stay right there. Okay. All right, so staff does not need any motion from us. You've got the direction you need, but.
For what it's worth, I would note that in the course of this item coming forward, we did hear directly from Flock that they are supportive of an independent audit. And so that, I think, had been a question that had been posed earlier. So again, I would take that as a positive indication that this would be a fruitful effort. And I'm sorry, Deputy City Manager, you had something you wanted to suggest?
I just wanted clarification if there was interest in this item going to the city council, if that was something we wanted the committee to refer.
I don't think we've got
enough right now.
Yes, this would not be advanced to the council. This would be something that staff would proceed with next steps on, I believe. Or did I misunderstand your discussion?
Well, my understanding is that the direction would be this will return to the council, but with some deference to staff on the timing of that based on IPA or ideally.
And
Yeah, exactly. Ideally, IPA and full audit.
Yes.
But in a reasonable time frame, because I agree with the chair. We don't want this coming to us in June. So hopefully before.
Understood.
So I'm in a different place, which is I feel that the council, in this moment, given what we're reading about, we were at an inflection point where we thought an audit was necessary. That's been stymied because of the conflict with our auditor, so it may take a little bit more time to find Plan B for the auditor. But I think this question of what in the interim, does council perceive, does the community perceive that the risk associated with letting this contract continue is such that we don't want to continue, and that we'd rather make that choice rather than an audit? I think the open question is, what is our relationship with Flock? Do we proceed with an audit or do we terminate? And that, to me, is a conversation that council should have fairly soon. And I'll add, I appreciate if we terminate, we lose the data. We don't have anything to audit. Right?
Yeah, I just don't want the council to be making a decision based on fear and uncertainty as opposed to data. And so I would really want some explanation. And this is something we'll have to work the police. Can we have clear enough direction from what the police know right now to provide real data to the council, so we're acting on data and not on fear?
So I think maybe a bit of a compromise. There's clear we need data to make this decision, but whether that is the full audit, the IPA, or internal discussions with PD and legal and staff, I think that's enough direction for tonight for staff to be able to make that final judgment on or not.
Well, I think the one area I'm unclear on and that is helpful direction. The one area I'm unclear on is the time frame within which you'd like that work to be completed. If it is prior to your July recess, then let's see, I think it would be helpful to understand that, because it is possible that an audit may take longer than that.
Yeah, I agree. I think something certainly before the July recess, and maybe council says we want to terminate, and then the audit. I mean, still, I think the audit will be helpful just to be able to make certain that no information was shared. But IPA and internal discussions prior to, at the very least, definitely prior before the recess.
That's helpful. That would give us a clear deadline that we're working toward, and we would set our own expectations on what we can accomplish within that time frame in setting up the report to council. So with that, I think colleagues here are saying we need a motion. So. Okay. You feel that's necessary? Otherwise, I would read it as we have direction for staff to continue our work with the independent police auditor as well as with the independent auditor to bring as much factual data information to a council discussion no later than June.
What I think would be useful, there's so much confusion right now in the public, is if we could have some type of study session where the council can learn, okay, this is the situation, this is what happened, and describe why we didn't lose our data and other cities did. We're hearing a lot of people, if you look at our council letters, a lot of people saying our data is going to ICE, which is not the case. So explain the status quo, and then also have the police department explain path forward, or staff explain path forward. Even if there's no decision made, just having a public discussion about this, I think would be a good thing.
Maybe adding on, just kind of trying to think how that could be. One, I do think it should be an action item just to give us that flexibility to be able to make the decision. But one thing I'm curious that I was thinking of, is it possible, because I agree with Councilman Rectal, I think the community really just needs to be updated on the facts here because yeah, we are hearing a lot of misinformation, which is, I think, troubling for everybody. Is it possible, city manager, that maybe in one of your upcoming city manager comments to be able to concede time to the acting police chief so that kind of the community can hear directly from him about this? I'm not sure if that's really been done, or I just think, or at least having him with you just to show the community that we're on it and that this data is safe as far as we know for now.
Sure, we can arrange for that.
Really appreciate that as a compromise. And obviously, we want to be completely within bounds in terms of our procedures and rules. And there is an urgent need, I think, to convey information that is accurate, and I think will turn out to be somewhat reassuring to our public. And so I think we create more of a problem for ourselves if we delay the release of at least some of this key factual information.
Understood.
Okay. Do you need a motion from us? Or
I don't think we do.
Okay, excellent.
We'll let others. All right, very
and
good.
I think the final item is just when is our next meeting?
The date of your next meeting is April 14th, second Tuesday of the month, and the items as of this moment tentatively are legislative update of things happening in session thus far, as well as federal updates, looking at potentially the fair chance housing ordinance, though that one might move to May. We're getting clarification from staff, and looking at 2 audit reports.
Okay, then with our gratitude, everybody, we are adjourned.